My guest at this time is Art Arthur. He is a resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. And Art, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's an interesting place we're at now when it comes to border security and the state of immigration policy. It was not that long ago that everyone on the Democratic side of the aisle, and a lot of Republicans as well, were howling over the declaration of a national emergency at the border that the president used to try and get money to build the wall. Now pretty much everyone agrees that there's a crisis there. So what, if anything, has changed here in the past few weeks? What is making things so much worse?
The biggest issue that is making things worse, or that's brought this to the fore, is the fact that we have seen such a huge uptick in the number of individuals who were apprehended entering the United States illegally. In fact, in the last month, in March of 2018, it's estimated that approximately 100,000 people were going to be apprehended or deemed inadmissible along the southwest border, up from 76,000 in February, which itself was up from 58,000 in January. So we've seen a rapid increase in the number of individuals entering the United States illegally, but most significantly, we've seen the demographics of that group change. As recently as 2009, 2010, 2011, about 90% of all of the individuals that we saw or who were apprehended were single adult males. In February, about 42,000 plus were either individuals traveling in family units or unaccompanied alien children. Again, that's 42,000 plus of 76,000. So about 60% of the population is either, consists of either children or adults who are traveling with children. Border Patrol just doesn't have the facilities to process those individuals in a timely manner. We lack the detention facilities to hold them, and HHS, who is supposed to take custody of unaccompanied alien children within 48 hours, is now out of space as well. So the system has broken down because it's so overwhelmed by the number of people that we see entering the United States illegally.
Just to clarify, and I know you and I have discussed this before, so what you just explained is certainly consistent with that, but some folks are wondering, why can't we just turn them away? Why do we have to take them in and then try to detain them and try to process them, try to go through their asylum claims and so forth? What's the policy, and what's the rationale for the policy?
Well, the policy is that we should be able to do just that. Back in 1996, Congress passed a law that called for expedited removal of anybody who entered illegally or who presented themselves at a port of entry with either fraudulent documents or no documents at all. And that system allowed DHS to move these individuals back to their home countries without having to bring them in front of an immigration judge. But in 2009, the Obama administration began releasing individuals who were found to have credible fear. So let me explain that. Credible fear is an exception to expedited removal. If you're subject to expedited removal and you assert that you have a fear of harm if you get sent back to your home country, you get interviewed by an asylum officer. And if the asylum officer determines that there's a significant possibility that you could be eligible for asylum or protection under Article 3 of the Convention Against Torture, then you're placed into removal proceedings and you're given the opportunity to apply for asylum. Up until about 2009, we saw about 5,000 people a year in 2000 who claimed credible fear. In 2009, the Obama administration began releasing individuals who had affirmative credible fear claims, and thereafter we saw the number of people who claimed credible fear jump exponentially. And in fact, last year, I believe 97,000 people who were apprehended at the ports or who entered illegally along the border claimed credible fear. We have about 520 asylum officers to screen all of those people, and we have about 400 immigration judges to hear their cases. So, that population of individuals swamped the system. Because we have so many people claiming credible fear, we can't remove those individuals right away. from the United States. People have realized that this is a loophole that they can use to enter the United States, and so they assert claims of fear in order to get into this country. We lack the detention space, and so most of them are released.
So what options realistically exist right now? We know with the makeup of Congress, with Democrats controlling the House, Republicans the Senate, and President Trump, who's more hawkish on this issue than probably either chamber, with that mix right now, it's unlikely there's going to be a consensus. So what can be done in the here and now to mitigate this as much as possible?
Well, unfortunately, congressional fix is going to be required in order to plug the credible fear loophole. And, short of Congress acting, there's nothing we can do about that. Another law that has encouraged individuals to come to the United States is the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008, which is sort of a misnomer as it applies to a very specific population of individuals, and that is unaccompanied alien children. If you're an unaccompanied alien child from a contiguous country, that is Mexico or Canada, and you don't have a claim of fear and you've not been trafficked, then Customs and Border Protection can send you back home. However, for any other unaccompanied alien child, those individuals, as I mentioned before, within 48 hours have to be sent to Health and Human Services custody to be placed in the least restrictive conditions possible, and that generally means reuniting them with family members in the United States. So parents in the United States who are here illegally started paying smugglers to have their children brought to the United States, and there's very little risk to the smugglers because they didn't actually have to enter the United States themselves. They simply had to send these children across the border. Border Patrol would pick them up, and they would basically complete the smuggling conspiracy by delivering those individuals to HHS, and HHS would deliver them to their parents in the United States. About 54% of those parents were themselves undocumented. So, again, that would require a congressional fix. However, the reason that we're seeing such a large number of family units is because of a court decision. In a case called Flores versus Reno, there was a settlement agreement back in 1997. The Reno is Janet Reno, of course. And in 2016, that settlement agreement was interpreted in such a way that no alien minor, accompanied or unaccompanied, could be detained by DHS for more than 20 days. Because we don't separate parents from children, adults in primarily the Northern Triangle countries of Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, are coming to the United States with a child, knowing that they themselves are going to be released within 20 days or less as a result of this. And there are things that we can do about that. DHS issued a interim regulation back in September of 2018 that would address this problem in Flores. However, that rule is stuck in the rulemaking process. I understand they've received hundreds of thousands of comments in response to it, and most of them have been negative. But DHS needs to actually use the resources or apply the necessary resources in order to get that rule out the door. But even once they do that, it's going to get challenged in the court, so it's going to be incumbent on the Department of Justice to then defend the rule in court. It's probably going to end up at the Supreme Court before that loophole can be plugged as well. Until that happens, we're just going to see a huge flood of family units again. Traditionally, it was a mother and a child. Now it's almost exclusively or largely fathers and children or adult males and children showing up at the border. So that is something that can be done administratively, but it's probably going to take some time before it has an effect.
Well, let's finish on that note with a little more detail, because obviously a lot of folks are aware that the Secretary of Homeland Security is now out, or at least cleaning out her desk. That's Kirstjen Nielsen, and we know that the president's looking for a new nominee to head up immigration and customs enforcement. So things are in flux right now at a time when resources and manpower are stretched very, very thin. So what's the smartest way to proceed, both on personnel and policy, if he has to do this unilaterally?
Well, the smartest thing to do is for the president to declare another national emergency and to implement what is called the Land Mass Migration Program, which provides additional resources in order to detain these family units so that they can, be screened for claims of fear, for credible fear, and if they're found not to have credible fear, to be sent out of the United States. If they do have credible fear, then to begin the removal process for them and potentially get that completed in such a way that they never leave custody if they don't have good claims, or that they can be quickly released from custody if they do.
Art, a lot of work to be done. We'll see if Congress can find some sort of common ground here, and if so, what it actually is. Thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Art Arthur, Resident Fellow in Law and Policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.